Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to episode 62 of Buha's Block. I'm here in Toronto for the Lakers matchup with the Raptors tonight, and on today's episode, we're going to be doing a mailbag. We have a lot to get into, but before we start, I wanted to talk about the news from yesterday. The Lakers declined the third-year option of guard Jalen Hood-Schifino, the number 17 pick in the 2023 draft. And it was a little bit surprising just because it's rare for a team to wave the white flag on a prospect this early into their career. JHS is in the beginning of his second season, and typically a player with his pedigree, with where he was drafted, and with how much the Lakers have invested in him and build, trying to build him up, typically they would just exercise the third-year option to save face and double down on what they seem to view as a sunk cost. So my read on the situation is this is the Lakers admitting that it was the wrong pick, and instead of doubling down and trying to save face, they are saying, like, we messed up and it's time to move on. And whether it's trading JHS as a $3.8 million expiring contract at some point here over the next couple months, or if it's just letting him walk next summer, or potentially signing him, but maybe re-signing him as like a minimum guy instead of making $4+ million, because I think that would be his market based on his production up to this point. So this almost certainly signals the end of the JHS era in Los Angeles, barring an unforeseen development in him in the G League and just him popping in a way that he has yet to pop at the NBA level. And I actually think this is the right thing for the Lakers to do. I know it's a tough pill to swallow given where they drafted him, given like the history of all this is they drafted him over Jaime Jaquez Jr., Brandon Pajemski, Cam Whitmore. Cam Whitmore was essentially the Dalton Connect of that 2023 draft. He was a guy that was projected in the top 10, projected at a minimum as a lottery pick, and he slipped all the way to 20 where the Rockets took him. And a big part of that was some knee concerns, and that's ultimately why the Lakers passed on him. It has not looked good, passing on Cam Whitmore, and that was probably the guy the Lakers should have taken given the available information. Obviously, I think I would take Jaime Jaquez Jr. or Brandon Pajemski over Cam Whitmore moving forward, but that's more of a hindsight take. At the time, Cam Whitmore seemed to be the right pick for the Lakers, a explosive, athletic, big wing who could play either spot, maybe even some small ball four, get out in transition, dunk on people, hit threes, catch fire. Like, the Lakers could really use that type of guy right now. And instead they have a guy who really struggled last season, ended up missing time because of back surgery, didn't participate in Summer League, and outside of a decent to solid opening game in the preseason has not looked like an NBA player. And again, like his best performance so far as a Laker outside of the G League, which doesn't always translate to the NBA, was that like 6 point, 4 rebound, 4 assist performance against Minnesota on the first, the preseason opener. So I think some fans had been holding out hope that JHS could become something. And the Lakers have the best view and the most information of JHS. And for them to decline that third-year option right now really is a sign that they do not believe in him. They do not believe in his potential anymore. Or at least they're not willing to bet a third year at around $4 million for next season. So, I mean, it's unfortunate for the Lakers. It is a wasted pick. It is a wasted asset, but maybe he has some value in a trade as an expiring contract being thrown in. If a team is trying to get off some longer term money in a deal with the Lakers, and JHS is an expiring contract that could be more appealing. It's also kind of rolling the dice on a second-year player who, despite how poor he has played up to this point, could theoretically still have some potential. Though again, the Lakers declining, like, to me, it's more of an optics thing where if the Lakers are declining it, I think that kind of kills his value as a prospect for to the rest of the league, just because they're like, well, if the Lakers didn't want him on a third-year deal, why should we? But again, as more of an expiring, like I think that's probably the best way to use him moving forward is just if the Lakers are making some type of trade with D'Angelo Russell, Gabe Vincent, or whoever, if you add in Jalen Hood-Schifino, that's now an extra $3.8 million that they could add in to get closer to, remember, the Lakers cannot take back more money in a trade. So there's always a chance a team picks up JHS and he plays much better for them and develops into the player the Lakers thought he could be, or at least 70% of that guy. But I think it's unlikely. I think at this point, JHS is on his way to probably being out of the league relatively soon. And yeah, I mean, it's a tough one for the Lakers, right? Like you never want to whiff on the number 17 pick, but I think given you can't go back, it's a sunk cost. And given the current state of things, I think this was the best decision just because now they can either trade him as an expiring or next summer he's just off their books and they move forward. And honestly, like having a vet minimum guard or maybe getting a wing or a big, like having that extra roster spot is valuable. And that player, I mean, there's plenty of guys who are like, I look at Alani Walker or someone else. Like there are guys out of the league right now who are better than JHS and would make a lot more sense on a minimum deal. And then depending on what happens with D'Lo and if he walks or if he ends up getting traded in the Lakers, like there are several ways the Lakers cap situation could play out, but this could help them now open up the non-taxpayer mid-level exception next year, which is about $14 million. So there is a chance, and it's complicated. I'm not going to get too much into it now because I want to get into the mailbag questions, but there is a path depending on what the Lakers do at the trade deadline and what happens with some of their potential free agents this offseason, including, most notably D'Lo, that they end up opening up that $14 million non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which would get them in the door with a lot of free agents. Now, that does hard cap you at the first apron, so there are some drawbacks to using that, as we saw during this past offseason with LA and trying to figure out if they were going to use that on a Klay Thompson or a Jonas Valanciunas or whatnot. But it is at least a tool they potentially have now, and it is more likely that they're able to use it if JHS is no longer on their cap sheet. To put a bow on it, like JHS was a mistake. Clearly, he has not developed. He has not looked like an NBA player. And I think LA realized that. They made a difficult decision. It's never easy to give up on a guy. I mean, they drafted him, 17 months ago, and they're already giving up on him. That's tough, but I think it's the right move. And I think moving forward, again, he's either going to be a throw-in in a deal to make salaries match, or he's going to just walk and allow LA to fill that spot with a better player. But with all that said, let's get into the mailbag. As a quick reminder for those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Question number 1 from Rodrigo_137. You think AD can keep this level up for the entire season? He's playing like a top 3 guy in the world right now. So there are 2 elements to this question for me, and I'll get into both of them. First, yes, I do think AD can keep this up. If you look at his numbers, they're actually in line largely with his Lakers numbers outside of his usage and his scoring. So right now, AD is averaging a career high 30.6 points per game. He obviously scored 30 points in 3 straight games to open the season, was just right there in the 4th game against Phoenix with 29. And then his 31.5% usage rate is the second highest of his career outside of the 2017-2018 season in New Orleans. But otherwise, if you look at it, again, like 12 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.5 steals, 2 blocks, those are all in line with his averages in both LA and New Orleans. So outside of the scoring and the usage, I think everything should maintain. I think it's, again, in line with what he's done before. And I think, as AD talked about in LA, I believe it was after the Kings game, like if you just give him more usage, you give him the ball more, give him more shots, like he's going to produce more. And his field goal percentage, 54.6%. It's a little lower than last season, but again, he's always been in the mid 50s for the most part. And I mean, if anything, I actually think he could score a little bit more because he's at 76.3% on free throws after being in the low 80s last season and in the last couple of seasons. So if anything, given how much he's getting to the free throw line and just how many attempts he's getting, like if that bumps up to low 80s, like 81, 82%, we could see him averaging 31, 32 points per game. So I think based on the way that the Lakers have restructured their offensive hierarchy, restructured their offense in general in terms of the different spots on the floor that they're using AD, I think that this is sustainable. But my one follow-up, and this is now the second part of it, is this sustainable from a workload perspective? And I wonder with, like in the beginning of the Phoenix game, AD got banged up. He was able to play through it, but there was some times he was grimacing and kind of lumbering up and down the floor. And then same thing in the Cleveland game. He goes down, injures his hip. He's probable for tonight's game against the Raptors, but like it was clearly grimacing, lumbering up and down. I mean, there was 4 possessions there. He didn't even move from the 3-point line, but then later in the first half was clearly in pain going up and down the floor, and it was kind of jogging and just lumbering. So the one question I guess I have is from a workload perspective, given how much he has to do defensively and then how much he's doing offensively and how much he's playing 36 minutes a night. Is that just too much? And at some point his body breaks down or he suffers an injury because he is touching the ball way more and is doing way more offensively than in previous seasons. And this is a guy that's obviously battled injuries. And while I think you could look at some of them, especially in LA, and say they're freak injuries, guys falling into his knee or him stepping awkwardly or whatever, it's not like it's just him jogging up the floor and his leg gives out. Like we see like non-contact injuries with some guys. It's often been some type of physical collision that leads to AD getting injured. But at the same time, he's dealt with hip and groin stuff. And when you're constantly banging with guys in the post or attacking off the dribble and getting to the free throw, like, I mean, part of it's like he's getting to the free throw line so much because he's playing more aggressively and more physically offensively and really attacking guys, attacking the rim. And while that's great for the Lakers, it's great for AD, it's great for the offense, it does come at a physical toll. And I just wonder, again, given the defensive workload, how much he's actually playing, and then the increase in usage and physicality, if at some point that adds up to him potentially getting injured or for him to rest occasionally and sit out if it's a back-to-back or just 3 games in 4 nights, whatever. Like, that's my only concern right now is we've seen him already start to get a little banged up and we're 5 games in, and how does that compound as this workload continues? So that would be my only thing, but I think he's capable of it because he's basically done it. It's just been he's getting to the free throw line more, he's getting more opportunity, higher usage rate, and should be in the MVP and Defensive Player of the Year conversations. Next question from @springmagic-POTYJ. We played 5 games with all good teams, 2 of them on the road. Am I the only one thinking 3-2 is not bad at all? That's 48 to 49 games out of 82 with no bad teams involved. Put bad teams into the equation and we should be at 50 plus, probably 55 plus. Another way to look at it, all the teams we were playing against were projected to be better than us, the worst from the group being the Kings, and they've been one of the worst matchups for us. What did we expect? 5-0? This is a really good point, and I think it's an example of how recency bias works. So LA starts 3-0, and they're the surprise of the league for the first week. You see all the apologies on the national shows and podcasts, and everyone's apologizing to AD. They're apologizing to JJ Redick. They're saying that they underestimated the Lakers. They shouldn't have had them like 9th, 10th, 11th in the West, and that they're looking like a contender. They're looking like a home court advantage team, at a minimum, a top 6 team in the West. And then now they lose the game to Phoenix after having the 18-point first quarter lead. And then they get stomped in Cleveland. And all of a sudden, at least with the fan base, the sky's falling down and JJ's overrated and this guy shouldn't be playing. And we got to blow it up and make a trade or make multiple trades, whatever. And I think that this is just an example of recency bias, because if this was a few days ago, all Laker fans were on cloud nine with JJ, with the rotation, with most of the players in the rotation. I know Max and Gabe got off to some slow starts offensively, and that has only continued. But I think the one thing I will say, so I predicted, I did Spectrum right before the season, and they asked us to give our record prediction for the 5 games, and I said 3-2 based on that schedule. And I had it a little differently. I had them losing to Minnesota, beating Phoenix and Sacramento, losing to Phoenix in the first game of the road trip, and then beating Cleveland. I did not see Cleveland's 5-0 start coming, and just how well they're playing. So I actually, like, 3-2 is in line with what I predicted, but I would say the context of how the Lakers got to 3-2, with having the 3 opening games and things going so well, and them looking so locked in and executing at a high level on both sides of the ball, and AD being heavily involved, Austin and Rui playing well. LeBron didn't have a great start, but did have that supernova stretch against the Kings. And the rotation, 6.5 of the past 7.5 quarters have not been good for the Lakers. And I think that's left a sour taste in the fan base's mouth. And again, sports is very of the moment, very reactionary. And I think a lot of fans are upset with how that stretch has gone, and understandably. Like, I think I just wrote this today at The Athletic. I think this has been a bit of a reality check for the Lakers in terms of they are good, if not really good, but there's still a bit of a gap there between them and the league's elite. And I think the biggest concern with them is just the perimeter defense. And they're at a disadvantage on most nights against, looking at Cleveland, that they really struggle to match up with Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. Looking at Phoenix, they really struggle to match up with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. Going to Sacramento, they really struggle with De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk. And the Lakers get the Raptors, then they get the Pistons, and I'm sure they'll blow out both of them, or at least win both of those games and look much better, and there won't be as much concern with the perimeter defense. But then they play Memphis, and Memphis just blew out Milwaukee at home. John Morant has been playing pretty well. Desmond Bane has been playing pretty well. And they're always dealing with injuries, so who knows who's going to be available for the Grizzlies, but that's going to be a tough road game. You are right. I think the proper perspective is 3-2 is probably the right record for the Lakers given the level of competition. And I would say, if anything, they've looked better than not on the aggregate. So there's more positives than negatives to start the season for the Lakers, but there's certainly room for improvement. And I think just having the Lakers lose back-to-back games and losing them in the fashion that they did, that's left a sour taste in people's mouths. So I think it's more the recency bias of just like how the record currently is, or how they got there, rather than the big picture of just like 3-2. I think if you gave the Lakers truth serum, they would take 3-2 based on how difficult that opening 5-game stretch is. So certainly there are some flaws and there are some concerns. I'm not denying that. The depth and the perimeter defense are my 2 biggest concerns right now. But with Jared Vanderbilt potentially returning relatively soon, who we're going to ask for an update tonight, and maybe Christian Wood coming back relatively soon, like that will boost some of the depth, give the team some size, some better defense, and we could see some progress in certain regards. So I think the Lakers are still trending upward, even if they took a step back or two over the past couple of games. And unless they lose to Toronto or Detroit, I'm not going to sound the alarm yet in terms of where this team is at. I think they're going to be fine. And as you laid out with your question, focus on the big picture. 3-2 against 5 good teams. That is a win in my book. Next question is a twofer. First one from @MatthewHurtado6968. When Vando comes back into the lineup, whose minutes do you expect to be impacted the most? Since Max Christie has been having a slow start, I wonder if his minutes will be impacted. And then the second one, along the same lines, from Sky Falcon 5. Where do you see Vando and Wood fitting in when they come back? How does the rotation change? All right, so the Lakers have been locked into their 9-man rotation. So where do these minutes come from for Jared Vanderbilt and potentially Christian Wood? Jackson Hayes is better at the things that they've been asking the backup 5 spot to do in terms of playing on the perimeter. Like, they've been playing to his strengths. So part of it might just be that. But in terms of being a DHO guy, a screener, and a roller and a vertical lob threat, in those second unit lineups, Jackson is better at those things than Christian is. Christian is more of a pick and pop guy, more of an ISO post up guy, and LA has just not been looking to do that. Now, obviously, Jackson can't do those things, so maybe it is simply just playing to the strengths. But even defensively, they've been using him more on the perimeter. They've been using him on the back line in that zone, and I think just Christian and Jackson are different types of players. They both do trend more toward the offensive end, but there's also the pre-existing relationship with Jackson Hayes and JJ Redick. JJ was one of Jackson's vets in New Orleans, and I don't think, like, we've seen it time and time again with coaches. Sometimes when you have a pre-existing relationship, you do have some favoritism or proclivity toward that player. So I've been on the side of, I'm not, like, people think Christian's going to come in and play a certain role, and I'm not certain that's going to happen. Now, Jackson has struggled at times defensively and on the glass, and that's where Christian Wood could probably serve as an upgrade. So maybe he does come in and take Jackson's minutes, or maybe it becomes matchup based where against certain teams that are bigger, maybe the Lakers play Christian for the defense and the rebounding, which is a wild thing to say, at least on the defensive side, but he is an underrated rim protector. And then on teams where they need some more, actually teams that are smaller, I think you could go more Jackson, vertical threat, and a guy who could play in a faster up-tempo setting, get out and transition. So I think they might be able to be like more of a matchup-based situation with Jackson and Christian, depending on how JJ feels. So to me, I look at it more as like, where does Vando fit in? And I do think Vando will be in the rotation. I think it probably comes at, I think people like to just take out one guy and make it that simple. I don't think it's going to be that simple. I think the Lakers probably go to like more of a 9.5 to 10 man rotation, and the minutes come from a little bit of everywhere. Like right now, Rui's at 34 minutes a game, and he is playing very well, but maybe that comes down to like 32, 31 minutes a game. Max is at 18, and you mentioned Max, and he has struggled. So maybe Max is down to like 10 to 12 minutes a game. I think LA, maybe he's 21. They just invested in him with a 4-year deal. I don't think LA is going to pull the plug on Max. I also, again, think he's been slightly better than people are making it out to be. Like, the plus minus has been bad. The shot making, the decision making, and even the defense, he's struggled with foul trouble. Guys have been able to go at him and score on him. But in terms of a team context, in terms of the little, like JJ talked about, the little things with him of just, he's really good at limbo rate. He's really good at getting back. And I think he's a switchable defender. He adds some pop. He's had some tip outs on offensive rebounds and stuff. Like, he does a lot of the little things that I feel like people gloss over because it's easy just to look at the box score or look at scoring. And like, I do think Max has been solid with the little stuff, but granted, he's been below expectations. He has not lived up to his spot in the rotation. So certainly if we're looking at guys that could maybe have their minutes slashed, Max would be at the top of that list, but I don't see it. I mean, maybe he gets phased out of the rotation. I could be wrong on that. I still think LA is going to look to keep him in there. And then maybe Jackson, instead of, those two big lineups, maybe we see a little bit less of it, and Vando's in there instead of Jackson. So Jackson comes down to 10, 12 minutes. And then that would be, right off the top of my head, some quick math, 12-ish minutes, 12 to 14 maybe. Maybe Dalton's minutes are slightly slashed unless he starts playing better offensively. I think Dalton, like, everyone's focusing on Max and Gabe, but Dalton, like, he went off in the fourth quarter in Cleveland, but that was garbage time. He was largely with the second unit in Bronny and Cam and stuff. Like, I think Dalton did not play well in Phoenix, and I don't think he played well the first 3 quarters in Cleveland. So if Dalton continues to be sort of a non-factor offensively outside of garbage time, like, maybe he's a guy that loses a few minutes. Maybe AD goes from 36 to like 33, 34. LA tries to save his workload. Some of those 3-guard lineups, maybe they reduce that a little bit. In that all adds up to Vando playing 16 to 20 minutes a game. I don't really see him going above that. I don't think JJ is as high on Vando as the fan base is, and I think he's much higher on Rui. And I think Ruiz is going to continue to be the starter and going to continue to play 30 plus minutes a night. So I think Vando is going to come in and potentially lead the bench in minutes. I think it'll probably be between him and Gabe, but I don't see him probably and I think it could be matchup based. JJ has talked a lot about wanting to play matchup based basketball in terms of the rotation and the schematics. And I think that's probably the right way to do it. So maybe there will be nights where they're playing a Luka, or they're playing the Celtics, or they're playing the Thunder. And if they're playing some of these elite, big scoring guards and wings, that's when you want Vando playing more minutes. And that's where it could creep up to 22, 24, 26 minutes. But I don't have a definitive answer for you. I've yet to get clarity on that. It is something I'm going to start digging around a lot. Again, as I said earlier, we're going to ask about Vando tonight, so we should have a better idea. Hopefully, we'll see what the Lakers. They tend to be quiet with injury stuff, but if we get a sense of when Vando's coming back, I think the next logical follow up is whose minutes is he taking? What's his role going to be? So I think we should have a better idea of that in the next week or so in terms of his potential role. But tentatively, I would say I see him as this team's sixth man. But given how much they're going to play the starters and really lean into the offensive end, I see him probably in that 16 to 20, maybe 18 to 22 minute range. And it's probably going to come at the expense of some of the bench guys, because I think JJ wants to keep the starters playing as much as possible, but then maybe a little bit from Rui, a little bit from AD, a little bit from LeBron, and save those guys' legs and their workload for later in the season. Next question from @T-Rav3493. Hey, Jovan, just want you to know I think you have the best Lakers content right now, so thank you and keep up the great work. Question: if AR keeps playing at this level, what are the chances he makes the All-Star team this year? Well, thank you, T-Rav, for the compliment. I really appreciate that. When you guys say you enjoy my content, it means the world to me. So thank you very much. As for Austin, so I did some quick research for you. Austin is currently 20th in the West in scoring among West guards. And as simple as it sounds, I think points are often a big factor in all-star voting and just a player's perception in the league in terms of their value and whether they should be on the all-star team. There are exceptions, particularly with big men, a guy like a Rudy Gobert, or through the years like a Ben Wallace and Dikembe Mutombo, guys like that. There will be exceptions if you're more of a defensive-minded player, but you have to be playing at such a level, like a clear defensive player of the year type level. Obviously that is not Austin. So him ranking 20th in the West among backcourt players in scoring, I think that alone almost certainly rules him out of all-star consideration. And just to go through some of the names on the list briefly, Anthony Edwards, Luka, Devin Booker, SGA, Kyrie, James Harden, De'Aaron Fox, Ja Morant, and Steph Curry. That is 9 names. And there's several guys that probably would be ahead of Austin in all-star voting or the coaches voting. But those are 9 to me that really stand out. And so I think it's just the backcourt in the West might be the toughest position in either conference to try to be an all-star in. And those guys, I just named 9 guys who legitimately look all-star level right now. And there's a chance only 5 or 6 of them end up making the all-star team. And a lot of it's going to come down to pedigree and standing and team record and team success. And there's a lot of factors that go into it. But I think it's going to be really difficult for Austin to make the all-star team. Now, that's not to say Austin's not having a great season, because I think he is. He's averaging career highs in points at 16.8 and rebounds at 6.0. Also in three-point shooting, he's shooting 44.8% on threes, which I don't think is sustainable, but it's certainly possible he's around that 40% mark. 52.5% on twos, second best mark of his career. And he held through the first 4 games Devin Booker, De'Aaron Fox, and Anthony Edwards to 9 of 25 shooting, about 36%. So I think Austin's taken on the primary assignments. He got cooked by Donovan Mitchell. That's a tough matchup for anybody. It was a tough matchup for Austin. Donovan Mitchell got hot. He was drilling threes in transition. He was attacking him off the dribble. And that's a tough matchup. So one rough defensive performance, I don't think takes away from the other performances against Booker, Fox, and Ant. And he's really good at funneling those guys, navigating screens and funneling them to certain spots on the floor where he can rear view contest or at least funnel them into Anthony Davis. Austin is playing great. He has been LA's third best player, in my opinion. He's posting career best marks across the board, and he's looked really, really good to start the season. This is the guy I think the Lakers expected last season, and it's a season later, but he is performing the way that they need him to perform, and he's a big reason why they are 3-2. Next question from @BrilliantBehavior. I would love Bruce Brown as a backcourt partner for Reaves. He can take the toughest assignment defensively and allows for more versatile lineups overall. Would you consider a D'Lo and Max for Brown trade if no picks were necessary? It's a good question. It's a fair question, but it's a tough question. I'm with you. I think Bruce Brown would be a really good backcourt partner for Austin Reaves. I thought he made a lot of sense for LA in the 2023 offseason when they went after him. They were convinced they were going to get him if he signed for the non-taxpayer MLE, but he ended up getting that 2-year, $40 million deal from Indiana. I thought he was a guy that they potentially could have traded for with Indiana, or when he ended up getting moved to Toronto. So I think Bruce Brown is a guy that would make a lot of sense for the Lakers. There's two things I'm a little bit concerned with him. One, he underwent arthroscopic knee surgery and has not returned yet. So anytime there's a guy going through knee surgery right before a season, I want to see that guy healthy for at least a month or so and make sure he's back to his normal level of production and play before I trade for him. I just think that's too great of a risk. And the second thing is Bruce Brown regressed as a shooter last season. He was down at just under 33% on threes. He sneakily was not a good shooter during the Nuggets championship run. He was actually at under 32% on threes for that playoff run. It was just against the Lakers, he hit every shot and at every three imaginable. So that stuck with Laker fans and their perception of him. So Bruce Brown's fit as a shooter, I think he's going to get high percentage looks playing next to LeBron and AD. And the ball handling and the playmaking and the defense, the toughness, the versatility, those are all things that are appealing to me. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to space the floor next to LeBron, next to AD. If you're throwing Austin and Rui in there, you need to be able to keep a defense honest and space the floor. And I wonder if Bruce Brown, with some of his shooting regression, if that would be a little bit of a concern. Now, as to the package of D'Lo and Max Christie, I would be potentially open to it, but to me, it's going to depend on, again, I've been saying I don't think the Lakers are going to make a trade until January, barring an unforeseen deal materializing. Rob Pelinka said as much. He said that he wanted to wait at least 30 games to judge this roster and to make any moves. So that would put the team in early January before potentially making a deal. That would give us at least a couple of months with this group and what they look like. And it really just depends to me on what Max Christie looks like. Because if Max Christie starts to play better and play like the guy that the Lakers want him to be and think he could be, then I would not include him in this deal. The other thing here is that, remember, right now the Lakers are playing only 4 guards between D'Lo, Austin, Max, and Gabe. Technically, you could say Dalton's a guard, but to me, he's more of a 2.5/3. But if you trade 2 of your guards and you only get back 1, now all of a sudden you have Austin, Bruce Brown, and Gabe Vincent. I guess you could slide Dalton down, but I mean, the backup guards are behind that are Bronny and JHS, maybe Maxwell Lewis, depending on if you view him more as like a 2 or a 3. So there's not a lot of backcourt depth. And while the Lakers at times have maybe had too many guards, too many ball handlers, I think having only 3 potentially that you want to rely on is probably too few. So unless they're getting back another guard in this trade or they're doing a separate deal to bring in a fourth guard, my one concern with this would just be giving up 2 guards when you're really only playing 4 and then only getting back 1. I think Bruce Brown, like him next to Austin, is the type of guy that I think would really complement Austin well and help propel that starting lineup to a better two-way group. So I'm open. Like Bruce Brown is near the top of my list in terms of potential trade candidates. I'd want to see what Max looks like 2 months from now. I know everyone's writing him off. I'm not writing him off yet. I'm holding my Max Christie stock. Let's see where Max is at 25, 30 games into the season. If he's still struggling, then I think I would entertain this deal. I still would probably prefer to trade like a second round pick or something. I'd probably fight to keep a first round pick for Bruce Brown. But if it's a second round pick or whatever, like that would be interesting. You do not want this to be another Alex Caruso situation where you give up on a guy prematurely. And Caruso's different. We don't need to rehash that. But like the Lakers, they're high on Max. And I think Max deserves at least a few weeks, if not a couple months, before LA just ships him out and gives up on him. Next question from @RyanRich2776. Do you think the team needs to address a backup center more or somebody who can help with scoring off the bench? Can I say both? Because I think the Lakers need both. Right now, they are 30th in the league in bench scoring and 2nd in the league in starter scoring. And while the starting scoring is encouraging and it shows the offensive firepower that they have with that starting lineup, the bench scoring has been atrocious. And I don't like, it doesn't really matter where you rank. Like if you're winning games and your bench isn't producing much, that's okay. But I think the bench has been not producing to such an extreme extent that it's been to the detriment of multiple lineups in the middle of each half. And you see from that like end of first into early second, early middle second, and like end of third into early middle fourth, the Lakers have struggled to score the ball for stretches there. Outside of LeBron going supernova in the Sacramento game, there's been a dip in production, and it's either been the non-LeBron or non-AD lineups have really struggled with the bench players that they're playing with. So I think scoring is a big, like they don't even need like a traditional 6-man or one of these guys averaging double figures, but you need Gabe and Max in particular to be more of threats than they are. Both guys are averaging 3 points a game and shooting far below their averages and what they should be shooting. So a bench scorer would be nice. Ideally, Dalton develops into that player. I would also say that if they are adding a bench scorer, it's got to be someone like theoretically it's a guard or a wing, right? Like typically most bench scorers, with the exception of like a Bobby Portis or a Naz Reid, for the most part, it's typically a guard or a wing. So if they are adding that type of player, that player needs to be able to defend. I don't think the Lakers can afford to add another perimeter player who can't defend into their rotation. So, I mean, that player would be expensive, right? Like even a bench player who can score well and defend. Those guys don't come cheap. So I say all this to say, I would probably say backup center is the bigger need and more of a defensive rim protector type who could hold the fort down, 180s off the floor. And if AD gets injured, a guy who could step in and start and at least keep the Lakers defense competent. Because I don't think Jackson Hayes or Christian Wood is capable of doing that. But that player is also expensive. So either one of these is going to cost potentially a first round pick or at least a couple of seconds. Every team could use another backup big that's solid, another scorer off the bench. So those guys are not easy to find. Hopefully for the Lakers, Dalton pops as a bench scorer, and then they can do maybe a separate trade or two to add another defensive-minded wing who can properly space the floor, and then also a better backup 5. Next one from @mythcard051. Hello, Jovan. Love what you do. Do you think LeBron does not defend 100% of the time? I sometimes feel he perhaps defends like 50% of the time. Do you think maybe JJ feels that percentage is perhaps 25 or maybe 70%? I'm not going to speak for JJ. I don't know how he views LeBron's defense. I think he's been rather complimentary of LeBron's defense up to this point. So, and I don't know how much of that is just coach speak or what he actually thinks. So I'm not going to speculate what JJ thinks of LeBron's defense. What I will say about LeBron's defense is you are correct. LeBron does not defend 100% of the time. He does take possessions off, stretches of games off. And I would say even to start this season, like he's had some good stretches, but he's also had some subpar stretches and some pretty bad stretches. I've talked about it before, like transition defense can be an issue for him. It can also be an issue for Anthony Davis. And I think it's the common thread between the Lakers struggling in transition under Frank Vogel, under Darvin Ham, and under JJ Redick now, in terms of they're last in the league right now in transition defense. And a big part of that, I think, is because LeBron and AD aren't always hustling back. And they've also been crashing the glass more now. So that leads to smaller guys being back, if anyone's back at all. And the Lakers are often at a foot speed and athleticism disadvantage in transition. And transition is often about, speed and athleticism and like who can beat who to a certain spot. It's one thing to do it in the Lakers are 10th in half court defense. And that's because when they have AD back there and they could set their defense and funnel guys to certain spots on the floor or be zoning up the backside, they can play solid defense. The problem is when it's a track meet or it's an athletic competition and it's about quick decisions and quick movements, and that's where they struggle. And we've seen it now for multiple years. So I would say that LeBron, it's tough for me to put a percentage on it. I would say he's probably defending around 50% of the time in terms of being like locked in. Like I think it really changes game to game, sometimes even quarter to quarter or like half to half. But I don't blame LeBron for that though, because this guy's about to be 40 in year 22, and it's like similar to if you have a Trae Young or a Damian Lillard on your team, you know that there is a certain, they're only bringing it to a certain level defensively. And that's largely due to physical limitations. But neither one of those guys has been like a lockdown, super active or engaged defender to begin with. And you just know, like, you're getting a certain level of offense from those guys. Those are two of the best offensive point guards in the league, but because of their size and because of their defensive limitations, that is going to put a bit of a cap on your defense. And I think it's the same thing with LeBron in this current form of just like, this dude's about to be 40. He's the oldest player in the league, year 22. He's played more minutes than any player in NBA history. It's unfair to ask him to play 100% of the time on the defensive end and give his all. And then also ask him to be all worldly offensively as a scorer and a facilitator and a playmaker. So I think if LeBron has to cut corners or conserve his energy in some regards, I think the defensive end is the natural place to do it. Now, can LA be more creative with how they scheme for that and where they use him? Yes, I think him as the low man can sometimes cause issues, as we've seen dating back for a couple years now. But LeBron not giving his all defensively, I agree with, but I also think that the context of it is like, this dude is played so many minutes and has such a big ask offensively. And just to be able to do what he's been able to do offensively at this stage of his career, at this age, that's incredible. But it does come with having to conserve energy somewhere. And I think it's largely been on the defensive end. And it hurts the Lakers defense. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but I think the pros outweighs the cons, right? Like LeBron is obviously a plus player and still a really good to elite player. So I don't like, I get your question, and I'm not trying to diminish it by any means. I just think that I think it's kind of like the cost of doing business with this current version of LeBron is you're playing a 40-year-old and you're still getting all-star, all-NBA level offense, but you are getting a diminished version of him defensively. He can get up to that 70, 80, 90%, I think, when needed, but on average, he's probably close to 50%, in my opinion. And last one from @FangCharlie3702. Hey, Jovan, it's Charlie here. My question on behalf of our fellow fans here in China would be, what's going on with Cam Reddish? Why isn't he getting a lot of playing time? And do you think he'll take over some minutes from someone? What's up, Charlie? And what is up to all of the fans in China? Thank you guys for watching and supporting. So with Cam, he missed a couple of games due to personal reasons, but I think if you look at the 9-man rotation that JJ Redick is running out, I just don't really see where Cam would fit in. I guess the guy he would be in competition with is Max Christie. And I know Max is persona non grata right now with the fan base, but I still think Max Christie is better than Cam Reddish. I know the Lakers still think that Max Christie is better than Cam Reddish. And I look at Cam and he had some opportunities in the preseason. He did not play well. Remember that Golden State game to close things out where they lost by almost 60 points. He went 1 for 11 in that game. And even in the Cleveland game in garbage time, I don't think he had a great shift. He got downhill and had a point blank open layup that he just missed. And I know Max has been blocked and his shot making and decision making have not been great. And those are also weaknesses of Cam Reddish. But I still think Max plays within himself better than Cam does offensively. And then he's also a better rebounder. And I think gambles less defensively. Cam is very big on trying to go for steals and play passing lanes, he's more of a defensive playmaker certainly than Max is, but it can also lead to defensive mistakes. Like this version of Max Christie versus Cam Reddish, I think is actually closer maybe to a real conversation, but I think Max is playing at his floor right now, and LA is high on him. They invested on him. He's a 21-year-old, and I think with Cam, honestly, if he didn't have the player option, he might be out of the league this season. I don't think the Lakers would have re-signed him, and I don't know if another team would have re-signed him. So Cam will always be a fan favorite for a lot of people just because of his high school ranking, because he went to Duke, and because he's flashed that skill set of being a scorer and like a kind of a 3-and-D guy, although he's never really shot the three that well. But for what the Lakers need, they need him to make open shots, and he's not a good shooter. He's a below average shooter, and the defense could theoretically help, but I think he's been such a minus in LA offensively that it offsets a lot of the defensive contributions. But if Max continues to struggle, maybe they go to Cam. Cam is a Dookie. Obviously, JJ Redick is one of the most famous Duke players ever. So there's certainly a chance that Cam could get a shot if Max continues to struggle. But I think we're at least a week or two away from that. I think Max would really have to struggle and play poorly for him to be replaced by Cam. With Vando coming back potentially soon, Christian Wood potentially coming back soon, I think Cam's going to be pushed even further down the pecking order. Like right now, he's probably the 10th man in the rotation technically, but those two guys come back, I think he's down to 12th, and I just don't really think he's going to play. So I hope that answers your question. I just think it comes down to Cam has not been good in LA, and compared to a guy like Max, who LA is higher on, he's younger than Cam. He's shown more flashes than Cam going back to last season, and I think LA's trying to be patient with him and let him continue to grow and develop. And they're not just cutting bait on him the way that they did with JHS to kind of bring this all full circle in replacing him with Cam. That will do it for today's mailbag. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tonight with a post-game reaction after the Lakers-Raptors game. I will talk to you then.